Woke Black is Beautiful beer maker goes bankrupt. Celebrated Texas brewery Weathered Souls shockingly announces end. These are the guys that made a beer called Black is Beautiful, which for the time, during the George Floyd mania, was a great idea. They produce beer for the craft beer market, and the craft beer market is used to paying more for beer. It's not the same as when you go to a supermarket and buy beer, because it's a premium craft beer. And the trend at the time was George Floyd everywhere. So Black is Beautiful, sure, it brings awareness. People bought into it. They had success making the beer. They even had Walmart knocking on their door saying, hey, can we buy your beer? From Supermarket News, going back to 2021, Walmart debuts Black is Beautiful beer from Weathered Souls Brewing. They were based in San Antonio. They could make the beer in San Antonio. The demand was great enough for them. It was such a big order just from Walmart alone. They worked with 8 other craft breweries just to service the Walmart account. Walmart reached out to them. Walmart saw an Instagram post that mentioned their beer, and Walmart made a deal to buy the beer. Beyond that, they decided they could promote the beer better if they licensed their beer out to other breweries. Now that's a great idea. Local breweries will, as part of their business, make beer for another brand and help with local distribution. The owners of Weathered Souls made deals with 1,600 breweries and also breweries in other countries to reproduce Black is Beautiful, their branded beer, in their local markets as well. They did that with a common label, so it looked like it was all the same brand, but did not keep the proceeds from that. They turned that over to social justice causes. The problem with doing something like that is then you're just managing a brand. And if you're managing a brand, instead of managing your whole business the way you normally operate, it's a different kind of business. And I will tell you this as well. If you own a brand and you have 1,600 licensees that are supposed to perform and pay you on this schedule and pay you on this basis, that's not what actually happens. If you're in business and you have customers that don't pay cash when they get your product or service, but will pay a little bit later, even the honest customers have to be chased around. But in the case of this, they're not set up to do something like that. They're not set up to put the brand out and try to have relationships with 1,600 different breweries and have relationships in different countries. They were not sophisticated enough to do that properly. But instead, these guys thought they would just go out, take one good idea, try to run with it, but not actually get the help to do it properly. Ultimately, they say they raised around $6 million to help their social justice causes. But if they had set it up the right way, they could have probably raised $25 or $50 million and still kept a good percentage of that. At least 10% of it, and they would have raised more money for the causes. Amid what had been a challenging year for Texas beer, one of the state's most celebrated and impactful craft brewers made shocking news. Weathered Souls Brewing Company of San Antonio, whose influence and success spread across the globe over 8 years, announced through its Instagram account that it would close its business after service on September 22nd. These guys also took another wrong signal. They thought because the Black is Beautiful brand was successful because it fit what the trend was at that moment, they could just go ahead and pick up from Texas and have a remote location in North Carolina. Businesses make this mistake sometimes. They have some success and then they figure, okay, let me just expand rapidly in some ridiculous pattern that we can't actually manage. And why would they do a thing like this? Well, they have a good reason. Here's what one of the co-owners said. Quote, I've been in the beer industry for 5 years, brewer Zachary Holt told WCNC Charlotte in February 2023. And 5 years in any industry, by the way, is not a long time. It doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's certainly not something to brag about. He continued, quote, I did not see very many customers or employees that looked like me or represented me. The brewery worked to change that with the goal of creating diversity in beer. I know what we'll do. We'll create diversity in beer. Okay, with the Black is Beautiful brand, you actually did accomplish getting attention to that in your niche market, in your industry, in a big way. That was actually very clever, very successful, and it worked. You just didn't fix the business model. When you have a success like that, then you're in the brand business. You're not in the beer business anymore. They should have never spent $1 million to open up another location all the way in North Carolina when they were based in Texas. And he also said, quote, change is definitely available, but we have to keep it at the forefront. We have to keep wanting it, because if you come in one time and you enjoy the space and you leave and don't come back, it's hard for places like this to survive, he said at the time. And they didn't survive. Not in North Carolina, and that failure was enough to help drive them out of business in San Antonio. In a statement, Weathered Soul's Director of Sales and Marketing, Kimberly Machado, said the brewery couldn't sustain itself financially. And usually the Director of Sales and Marketing is not making statements about the future of a company. They actually just do sales and marketing and promotion. But they managed to get her on the phone, and this is what she had to say. Well, the industry has been facing several challenges, and for us, the rising cost of ingredients and a noticeable decline in alcohol consumption played a significant role in our decision, Machado wrote. Quote, despite our best efforts to adapt, the financial pressures became difficult to sustain. It was a tough choice, but after careful consideration, we felt it was the right time to close this chapter. This is them shutting down essentially at the end of September. Co-founder Marcus Bakersville had already stepped down in June of 2024. And usually when the founder starts to leave, especially 3 months before it all falls apart, it's kind of over by then. Weathered Souls had accomplished a lot in 8 years, setting the tone for innovation and leading conversations about the makeup of the brewing industry while growing distribution across the U.S. Homebrewer Marcus Bakersville, Mike Holt, and Seth Parker co-founded the brewery in 2016, gaining immediate attention for showcasing hazy IPAs, imperial stouts, and pastry sours, the kind of beers that were yet to gain traction across most of Texas. So maybe they actually did know what they were doing. They just didn't have the experience to know what to do when things changed a little bit. Well, there were these exciting new styles that typically San Antonio craft fans needed to go out of state to enjoy, according to Bakersville. While Weathered Souls was already one of the top breweries in the Lone Star State, it made a nationwide impact in 2020. After the death of George Floyd, Weathered Souls concocted a stout called Black is Beautiful. The brewery began sending its recipe out to other breweries who could make their own version, as long as they donated proceeds to organizations that supported either police reform or legal defenses for victims of police brutality. And that was their big mistake. You just can't say, okay, there's 1,600 of you. You're all going to have your issues and your own problems doing this. There's essentially, it looks like, no money up front. Here's our license. Here's our label. Here's our recipe. Go make our brand in your local market. So now, whatever beer they're making, they're going to compete with all of these other brewers. I mean, maybe they carved out a specific little area in Texas somewhere, but 1,600 brewers is kind of a lot of brewers, so probably not. If you want Black is Beautiful beer, do you need to buy it from them? No, you could buy it from one of their competitors. But to think that they're going to tell their brewery customers, yeah, you can use our brand and our label, just make sure you give the money to a good cause. But they're not going to police that, and they're not going to participate in that. Of course, it's all going to fall apart. When your company gets noticed in the media, and this happens sometimes, you get good publicity, something gets picked up, something just becomes popular, you're going to get a lot of phone calls from investors, from experts, from industry people, and they're going to be pitching you things. This is something that happens. You can make that happen if you get a little PR going for yourself and you do it deliberately, but it's best when it happens organically like this thing did. They came up with their Black is Beautiful beer. It was all over the place. I did hear about it. And then people that know that industry and investors and people that want to help all start to call. It doesn't look like they made any intelligent deals with anybody who really knew what they were doing that could have helped these guys. Because had they done that, they would still be in business and they'd be doing a lot more business. Black is Beautiful took off, with around 1,600 breweries worldwide making their own versions. The initiative raised nearly $6 million and brought considerable attention to Weathered Souls, which was at the time one of the few Black-owned breweries in America in 2023. Weathered Souls was named as a semi-finalist for a James Beard Foundation Award for Outstanding Bar Program. Weathered Souls in 2023 released Volume 2, a new Black is Beautiful recipe for an IPA, with proceeds benefiting the National Black Brewers Association. Because of its success, Weathered Souls was arguably the most visible black-owned brewery in an industry where the staggering majority of businesses are owned by white men. And probably a few of those white men would have been great to do business deals with who actually know the industry, because these guys had a good idea, they were authentic, but they blew it. Quote, even then, we look at the brewing industry and we know it has the ability to be inclusive, but based on the numbers, it's not that inclusive, according to Bakersville. Quote, so to see that many breweries involve themselves was definitely a very humbling surprise. But like so many breweries nationwide, remaining financially viable was a struggle. Weathered Souls expanded to a North Carolina location in November 2022. But they closed that spot less than 6 months later, citing financial struggles owing in part to inflation and post-COVID-19 supply chain issues. When you have a business, if you do have a business, you know this. If you've worked for a small business, you get the inside talk. About 1,000 things can go wrong, and then the next day, like 10,000 more things can go wrong. Anything can go wrong. Doesn't mean you shouldn't run the business, but it does mean don't overexpand into another location in another state that you can't keep up with. And here's what one of the owners said. Quote, I desperately don't want to close, but it's been a drain on the entire company. That was the North Carolina location. They lost more than $1 million on that, and it was more than $1 million than they could afford to lose. Holt looked to sell his shares of the business in 2023, but those plans reportedly fell through. Bakersville announced his departure from Weathered Souls earlier in 2024. The brewery told fans that it would celebrate the end by hosting a community bottle share the day before the business closed. Quote, our hope is that when people talk about Weathered Souls in the future, they remember the community we built, the creativity we poured into every brew, and the way we pushed boundaries to give San Antonio something it had never seen before, Machado wrote. A number of Texas breweries have closed this year, including the Houston area's Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company and Ingenious Brewing Company, and the Dallas stalwart Deep Ellum Brewing Company. Now, this couldn't keep them in business, but they almost had a chance to win the company back. From Forbes, Black is Beautiful, the biggest ever collaboration project ever, is coming back. And this was in 2023. One of the most significant social initiatives ever launched in the alcohol industry, Black is Beautiful, is making a comeback 3 years after it rallied craft brewers across the globe to share its inspiring message. It was launched by Weathered Souls Brewing Company of San Antonio, Texas, and its co-founder and head brewer Marcus Bakersville in the summer of 2020 in response to the turmoil surrounding the death of George Floyd. The collaboration brewing project highlighted the social injustices faced by people of color. Quote, I wanted to make a positive statement amid so much anger. I wanted people to know we can change, says Bakersville. Beer was made to bring people together, and that's what this project did in the end. It united us. To date, it has seen over 1,600 breweries participate in releasing their own unique version of a Black is Beautiful stout beer using a base recipe created by Bakersville. Having every participant agree to use the same stock label instantly created a platform with a simple message that resonated. It also has seen over $6 million raised from various local organizations that support equality, inclusion, and social reform due to every participant's pledge to donate their proceeds. And I'm sure everybody kept their pledges. Now, of course they didn't. That's the other tragedy. If they wanted to donate a portion of the proceeds and manage the whole process and say, no, you've got to pay us directly, and then we're going to give you the labels in addition to our license, and we're going to control the flow of all of this beer, that could have actually worked. But they didn't do it that way. The initiative thrust Bakersville and his brewery into the national spotlight. Plus, it gave him a voice in calling for more diversity in an industry that needs it. According to the Brewers Association, less than 1% of craft breweries in the United States are owned by African Americans. He was elected to the board of directors for the Brewers Association in 2020 and established the Harriet Bakersville Incubation Program at the recently opened second outpost of Weathered Souls in North Carolina, which we know now was a pretty big mistake for them to do. The program aims to introduce women, BIPOC, and LGBT individuals into the brewing industry. So they're busy focused on relationships with people that create great publicity but don't actually make money, and they spent all that time on that, and now look at what happened to them. Out of business. But the launch of the National Black Brewers Association in May of 2023 motivated him to bring out Black is Beautiful Volume 2. The nonprofit, upon whose board of directors he sits, is dedicated to increasing the number of African Americans in the craft beer industry. Every brewery participating in Volume 2 will pledge to donate $1 per beer to their organization. So they're at least getting a little sharper at that point, like, hey, we've got to control how the money goes. We can't just say, just pledge to donate this money to something that we might like, and then they're not checking. This is why they did it this way in 2023, obviously, because people weren't donating money. They were just using the name. Quote, the National Black Brewers Association is the ideal organization to ally Black is Beautiful with this time. Quote, we can help fund their mission to create a more inclusive environment in craft beer and set the stage for more persons of color to enter into the industry successfully. By offering brewers the chance to work with one of the hottest beer styles on the market, the hope is to attract another round of drinkers to the cause. As the first go-around, everyone will use the same label that they can customize to promote the beer. They shouldn't be customizing the label like whatsoever. They should be providing the labels and controlling the money and building it enough that this guy could have made a little bit of money doing this, not just donate all of his time to try to do something that won't be profitable but was actually a viable idea. They can get a lot of distribution for this. The reason Walmart sought these guys out to do a deal with them was because they were part of their supplier diversity program, which means they discriminate against other suppliers so they can have suppliers of certain specific races, genders, or sexual preferences selling them products. They actually had that, so they had an easy handout. But as you can see, easy handouts don't always work. Sometimes they lead you down the wrong path, and that may also be what happened here. Just because you get a contract with Walmart doesn't mean you can service it profitably, and it doesn't mean they're always going to be very nice to you. Walmart can be very tough to deal with. If Black is Beautiful garnered the same support as its first incarnation, it should easily hit its $1 million goal to fund their nonprofit in the early days. That should help make a difference in the craft beer industry and promote a positive message. Well, what happened? It didn't work. Go woke, go broke. It's not just for Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney. It also works for small brands. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.